Welcome back to the Beyond Cloud series of Discovery discussions presented by Intelligent HQ and hosted at Groupe INSEEC here in London. Paul,
Hi, Daniel.
I'd like to start off with a little bit of a understanding about what your business is, and not what you do specifically, but how it's related to the cloud these days, how it might have changed, what are the fundamentals, and particularly in terms of risks and opportunities. And I think there's a couple of interesting angles here from the investor's point of view.
Yeah, sure. So we've got two sides of our business. We've got a professional services firm, which is called Jenson Solutions. We're a 22-partner firm spread across the UK. So we use the cloud a lot in our business because we're very mobile, so we have to have all our applications and all our data in the cloud to be able to, to make us work effectively. So we do use the cloud from a business point of view. The other part of our business is a small fund management business. So we have a small fund which invests in early stage, typically technology businesses, and a lot of those businesses have a cloud focus. So we're very interested in seeing new opportunities in the cloud space, but we're also quite focused on businesses that are really utilising the cloud and how it should be, because there are good businesses and there are good investments, and we've got to look at what is a business doing that makes that business a good investment from a cloud perspective.
Interesting angle when you say about how it should be, because sometimes we have a pure technical, simple business answer about that, but I think from the investor's perspective, we're actually looking at the structure of the business and will they actually be able to support and deliver what they're talking about.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, it's. I think there's always a, sort of the two sides to things. There's lots of very good technology out there, but doesn't necessarily make a good business. And I think we tend to look at it from a is it an investable business? Can you take this technology? Can you scale that business? Can you generate value? Can you distribute the software? Can you get the right price for it? So rather than just looking at is that exciting technology? And I think sometimes you can get as you're a techie yourself, Daniel, you can get overexcited sometimes in the purity of the technology. And what we tend to do is look at that and then take a step back and say, okay, can you turn this into a business? And that's quite a different thing.
No, absolutely, and I think that this is one of the mistakes that a lot of people, both looking for money and looking to spend and invest money, are coming across. There's so much excitement about the hype that's around the cloud, and if you simply take the word cloud out of the equation, we're talking computing, we're talking IT for business, better, stronger, faster ways to do it. How much of what you're seeing coming to your business is got the word cloud in the first sentence versus the things that are using cloud as a part of how they do things, as opposed to the people who aren't even aware of cloud?
We do see some where they definitely put across the front of the business plan is cloud this, cloud that, and sometimes you kind of think, are they just trying to get onto a bandwagon? Or if it's the technology is good and the service is good and the product is good, you shouldn't need to mention cloud. Or well, those businesses where they start to labour the point a lot, you tend to pull back a bit because you think, well, are they just too excited about the technology and not really thinking about the business? It's when when they start talking about Web 2.0, again, it's I kind of sort of think, okay, this, I was there for Web 0.01 or whatever, and you kind of look at, we've seen it all before, and there is a degree of hype, and you've got to kind of get beyond that and look at the underlying business and what can it achieve with the technology it has.
I was talking with a company just the other day, and they're looking at rebranding, and they decided not to use cloud in the company name, and I suggested that was good because in a couple of years' time, cloud might just be a quaint thing when you look back, and this is the big brand that you've built. So this actually moves us into the next question quite nicely. Cloud is the next big thing, or maybe it's big data or mobile computing or all of these things, and actually cloud is kind of that which enables all of the above. It's the delivery vehicle, the roads that get you there. Why is it, or is it different than the last big thing? And I'm going to ask you from a completely different angle than I might be asking some of the CTOs who are going to be joining us, because you've been involved in the different types of technology, but again, from the business side and looking at it from the focus of how these businesses are going to grow and where they're going to take their place into the industry.
I think the big change this time. I mean, there is similarity. I think there's a few differences to, sort of the dot-com days. I was a I was a director of a dot-com, a listed dot-com back in the late 90s. So I went through that whole sort of phase, and there's certain things that are similar, but I think it's fundamentally different. Back then, a lot of the businesses were looking at taking existing retail models and putting them online. And it wasn't much more than that, really. I think this time there's a bit more focus on the business-to-business side, about integrating different bits of software. If you look at the smartphones, the app development reminds me much more of the sort of the dot-com days. Take your website and make an app out of it. That doesn't make you a fantastic business. That's just another route to market. It's not going to revolutionise your business. But there are other applications which are doing that. So there's a lot of applications now being developed for things like Salesforce and Dynamics, which are taking your existing sort of, as a business, your existing software, and then plugging in an application which then enables a bit additional services. And I think those sort of businesses are quite interesting because they're going a step beyond what we were sort of seeing 15 years ago.
I think the problem that I'm seeing is that I hear a lot of people thinking the cloud's going to solve all the problems of the legacy. They talk about all of these disparate systems that need to be connected and need to be interchanging information. My position is that if they weren't doing it 10 years ago, why is cloud magically going to allow them to do it today?
Yes.
Comes back to that same lost opportunity. You're so busy doing the new stuff, not the old. So you want to get the new to converge with the way that you're going to be doing things, but you can't just stop and start from scratch.
No. I mean, I think we've seen a lot of companies who are trying to replace lots of different systems within companies with one overall integrated solution. And the problem, I think there's a huge problem with those types of businesses because you're competing against not only you're trying to change current practice within the business, you're trying to compete with every single one of those other products. So you've got to be better than all of those products as well. So if you can't deliver the same level of functionality or equivalent, the fact that you're now integrated, they're going to say, no, I know we definitely need that bit of functionality, and that's a problem. And I think there's the kind of businesses I'm looking at is, you take something like Salesforce, which a lot of companies use, but it has a limited functionality. But you can build a business on the back of what Salesforce already has by, you generate a bit of or build a bit of software, you plug in through Salesforce API, and you deliver additional functionality that Salesforce doesn't offer. And those businesses are quite interesting because they give you immediate scale because you give access to the whole of the Salesforce marketplace. You're not having to build a huge piece of software because you're not having to think about security. In the truest sense, you're just having to integrate with the existing sort of protocols that are already there. So your kind of the functionality you have to deliver is much reduced, which means for a startup company, they can actually deliver something quite interesting very cost effectively. They're not having to build some huge ERP system and try and compete against SAP or Edwards. It's much more contained.
I don't disagree that the opportunity is there, but if somebody came to me to invest, or you came to me to advise you about an investment in a company who their entire business model was dependent on Apple letting their app out into the iTunes store, or a Facebook not shutting you down, or Twitter allowing you to continue to use their newsfeed. We saw Ribbon a few weeks ago created this clever in-tweet payment system. Within 6 hours, they were shut down. Now, this can happen because the person who owns the data wants to do it themselves, or they don't want to see people generating revenue with their stuff that they shouldn't have. So if somebody comes to you with that as a business model, I'm pretty clear that you're going to have a no as an answer.
It depends on what it is. I mean, there is absolutely. If you're completely dependent on Facebook to deliver a piece of software, then yes, you've got to weigh that up in terms of the risk. Is this something which Facebook would close down for whatever reason? Is it something that they would want to replicate, or is it something actually they won't really care about, and they would see as an opportunity for them to generate potential revenues on the back of as well? So it's absolutely part of your normal sort of risk analysis. Absolutely, yeah.
And I guess it's the same thing when you see the startups that are coming. Some of them have an application, some of them have something on an iPhone or on an Android, and they believe that it's a business. And my kind of cardinal rule is that a business may need an app, but an app does not necessarily make a business.
Yes.
Are you seeing a lot of people that are showing up with business plans and business models and forecasts to become the next Facebook out of their little application on iPhone?
And there's some way the kind of you look at the use of proceeds, and you're going to give them some money, and they're going to spend it on marketing to get lots of users, which then once they got those users, they say they're going to then make money by charging people to advertise on their site. And you're kind of thinking, okay, this is a bit like a Ponzi scheme. So the next new startups get the loads of money who spend on marketing to the companies who now become established because they've got the people, they've got the users. And it's all just kind of a huge Ponzi scheme. And those sort of businesses, we're just not interested in, because it's, well, what's just spending lots of money to get lots of users is not a business. You've got to be generating something that's unique. You've got to be generating something that no one else is doing. Just saying, oh, we're Facebook, but we've got extra privacy settings. But we need a £2 million to go out and get lots of users. Those are the sort of businesses. They may be successful, but they're far too high risk for us.
Every one of them, of course, has cloud behind them, because all of the applications are just attached to the web, which is the cloud, but they aren't necessarily saying it or seeing it in the same way.
No.
I'm going to move forward to the next question, which is a bit of a controversial one with some people. Regulation. I personally believe that regulation is, in this space for cloud computing for managed service providers, is a bad idea. I don't think it can be regulated. I don't think it can be monitored, so I don't think there's any real amount of value. And I don't know why government needs to suddenly put their fingers into something that is just a regular standard business practice. But I'm sitting through these sessions waiting for somebody to change my mind. What's your position?
I think there's different sides to it. So there's the regulation around from a security point of view and national security, and I'm always very skeptical about those sort of things, because I kind of think, well, GCHQ in the UK, they probably listen to everything anyway, and when they come out and announce that they can't hack into Skype conversations, to my mind, I kind of think they probably can, and they're probably just telling people that they can't, to people who want to do bad things to their country will use Skype. So I'm kind of slightly sceptical about that, those sort of things. I think regulation, I'm not a big fan of it. I kind of look at the regulation that happened in the financial sector and things like Sarbanes-Oxley, and the costs, the trillions of dollars it's cost for businesses to comply with them. And I look at it, if someone's determined to break something, they will do regardless of what regulations you've put in place. If a 14-year-old in his bedroom can hack Microsoft systems where you've got thousands of security people trying to stop it, if someone's determined to do it, they will do it. And regulation, all it does is it adds a huge layer of cost and hassle to companies who wouldn't have done those things anyway. So I think I'm not intrinsically not in favour of regulation.
We will point out that this is an accountant as well. So.
Yeah, but there is absolutely. But there are, I think there's principles you can put in place. But ultimately, I think I'm not a fan of regulation. I think the people who are not going to do stuff aren't going to do it whether you have regulation or you don't have regulation. It just adds complexity, cost, inefficiencies into the system. The people who are going to break those rules, they'll break them whether they're there or not. So from that side, I'm not a big fan. I think there's where I'm on the other side, though, is things like HTML5. There's a huge cost and complexity around producing native apps. So if you're producing an app for an Apple-based app, you're producing an Android, BlackBerry, and a Windows app, that's a huge cost. So a lot of people say, okay, well, can we use HTML5 because that's cross-platforms, and it sounds great, from a kind of high-level point of view, you think fantastic. You can use it on you use on Safari and Explorer and Firefox and all these different browsers, and it all works. HTML5, great idea. What have each of the browser companies done? They've implemented different parts of HTML5. Absolute nightmare. If you're a developer trying to develop on HTML5, your app will work on certain parts of it will work on Safari, other bits won't work on Firefox, some will work on Chrome, some will work on on Explorer. So in that area, regulation, I think, and standardization is actually quite useful.
I'm glad you mentioned standardization, Paul, because we do have a big separation between the two. And regardless of how companies implement their own versions of standards, at least you have this underlying 90% or 80% of similarity across the board. But from a regulation perspective, I personally think it's a slightly Darwinian, and it's just the way business works. You do a good job with your customer, that customer will continue to do work with you. If you don't, they'll leave. Now, where we get a little more fuzzy and where it's a little more complicated is in this cloud space, because instead of my hiring you to do something with this and then give it back to me and we're finished, now I'm hiring you that we're going to do stuff with this together for the next 5 years, right? So I need to be a lot more cautious when I shop.
Yes.
I need to be looking at an awful lot more details than I might have, because I'm not taking you out on a date. I want to marry you.
Yes.
Right? So I want to have a prenup that allows me to exit this relationship. I want to be able to understand what it's going to take, what it's going to cost, how are you going to support me in doing that, or when I decide I don't like how you did things, are you just going to turn your back on me? So we need to have these types of standard approaches that businesses are setting up for themselves. We need to have the standards of the technology so that the users are not being given the wrong thing. But when I use the word regulation, I think about government, and I think about somebody setting a law that a standard needs to be followed, which is quite different.
But it's interesting on that, in terms of transitioning from one sort of provider to another. If every sort of big sort of cloud-based provider will say, oh yes, it's your data. So if you want to leave, we'll give you back your data, and they'll give you it in a huge, great big flat database file, which is absolutely no use to you at all. But they say, well, we've done what we said we should do, and we said we were going to give you your data. It's your data. But what's interesting is that if you look at what's happening on the other side, is that the company that wants your business is saying, well, what we can do is, rather than just take that flat file, we've got an API to your old piece of software, and we'll suck all the information out and populate your new software. And it's almost like the onus is on the company who wants your business to make that transition better, rather than the company who's losing your business. And that's quite an interesting space in terms of the kind of Darwinian thing. But it's the company that if you're saying, right, look, I don't want to deal with you anymore, they're saying, well, fine, there's some data that you can't do anything with, but it's kind of pushing the onus on the company who wants your business.
So maybe this is where we have a level of regulation is required, because if I want to swap mobile phone carriers, I can call them up and I can get a code that allows me to move from one to the other, and there's a time frame, and from at noon on this day I'll have the new service in place, and I'll have had no disruption. We aren't that sophisticated. I can't say whether or not that was a regulation that made that happen, or if that was simply the carriers getting along together.
Regulation, yeah.
And I suspect it was a regulation for bank machines to have a standard that my card could work in all of them as well. That level of regulation to encourage things that protect the consumer, I appreciate. But to start regulating a bunch of businesses that are kind of like the VHS beta stage, we don't know exactly where things are going to go, and a lot of people are looking at opportunities and thinking, oh, I can make money with this, and they will fall by the wayside along the way. So I think we need, on one hand, I'd say we need the playing field to settle a little more before we can regulate it, but on the other hand, we're talking technology and constant change, so the playing field is never really going to settle.
No, and there's always a balance to be struck. I mean, it's like the PAC codes on your mobile phones makes changing your mobile phone provider a lot easier. They should have a similar system with banks, so you can change. You can take your sort code and account code with you when you go to the next bank, so you don't have to change all your direct debits. And that would make the banking system far more efficient, far more competitive. Because at the moment, the statistic in the UK is you're more likely to divorce than you are to change your bank. And you think about the poor service you get from your bank.
I'm glad you said bank.
I didn't say wife. Yes. So there are occasions where government can, just with a small bit of regulation, can make a massive difference to an industry. And I think that's something I think government's always got to kind of have their eye on. They're not sort of being prescriptive or trying to stop things, but if they can do something which with large companies are not doing, it's like the antitrust law rules in Europe against Microsoft and the installing of Explorer onto Windows. Things like that are quite important. So there's got to be kind of a bits of regulation to sort of stop anti-competitive practices. But yeah, I think trying to regulate the internet or trying to regulate the cloud, it's fraught with complications, and you've just got to let it sort of grow and develop. And solutions will, if there's a problem, solutions will be developed to sort those problems out. So if people can't transfer their data, someone will come out with a way to do it.
I guess the only issue is that they who legislate need to get information from they who know in order to, as opposed to thinking that they know a great deal about it and then applying a bunch of words like we've heard people in the EU do over the past few months about cloud and the like.
Yes.
As I mentioned earlier, I tend to consider cloud as the delivery vehicle. It's the motorway that takes all of the cars and the people to the places that they're going. The cloud may well consist of lots of on-ramps and off-ramps and service stations and toll booths, but it really is that vehicle that gets us to where we're going.
Yes.
So in terms of where we're going, I'd like your opinion, because you see an awful lot of suggestions and ideas and silliness and innovation, I imagine, in equal measures. But I'm wondering about your views on where cloud is taking us next and how cloud might change on the way.
I mean, I think it's, the trend is certainly that more and more the services you consume are going to be delivered through the cloud, and that causes huge problems. There's problems with security. You might have all your documents up in SkyDrive or something, and do you have them encrypted? That's sort of, there are issues for businesses around that part of the cloud. There's issues about connectivity. So if your Wi-Fi goes down or your 3G connection goes down, if you can't work, it's a huge problem. There's huge issues around people using their own devices. So IT departments have spent years trying to get control of their IT infrastructure. To suddenly now everybody's logging into the main servers through their iPad or their smartphone. Getting control for a corporate back into that area is a difficulty, and I think a lot of devices, a lot of iPads, which aren't really set up for the corporate infrastructure, are potentially at a risk. I think Microsoft, which is kind of a bit more embedded in the corporate infrastructure, has a real opportunity with the sort of Windows 8 tablets to embed themselves within the corporate infrastructure. So a big corporate can say, right, okay, if you're going to use your own device, it has to be following these protocols. So I think there are challenges, big challenges for the cloud, but I think there's huge opportunities. I really do, and I think as an investor, there are really interesting businesses with really interesting models that can deliver proper value, and you've got to go past it's the cloud, so it's exciting and it's new. You've got to really look at is this business really going to generate value? And people don't like change, especially businesses. So you've got to have something very, very compelling to get a business to change the way it works. But it is, I think it's not I don't believe it's a revolution. I think it's an evolution. I think it's making people potentially, if they can get connectivity all the time, making them slightly more productive, 1 or 2% a year. But that's the sort of thing that drives the economy. That sort of small bits of incremental productivity gains. So I think it's going. I think the trends are around more integration, more apps being delivered, or more services being delivered through the cloud. But where it will go, I don't think it's going to be a revolution. I think it's going to be an evolutionary process.
Microsoft's an interesting angle to bring into that, because when you talk about the operating systems and you look at the press, there's a lot of people thinking, well, Microsoft is going to die now because of the tablet environment, and the corporate infrastructure that is dependent on Microsoft and has all kinds of resources and expertise in there to do that space. Part of the reason why Microsoft isn't going to disappear over the next few weeks. The other reason is that Microsoft is actually positioning themselves to become a massive cloud player.
Yes.
Now, that's corporate and consumer, and there's lots of plays in this space, but when you have the cloud and the depth of a product set that fits into the corporate lifestyle, as the Microsoft products do. I know security companies that are using Google apps, and it works if you do it the right way, but they know how to do it the right way. The non-security companies that are using Google apps aren't necessarily aware of how exposed they are. I guess the other thing too is that everything that we're doing is cloud-based, because the cloud is really just the internet. It's that stuff that's out there and this fluffy thing. So whether it's an application or the new approaches to fundraising that we've been seeing, I'd like to hear a bit from you about things like the various elements of crowdsourcing, which is social and cloud and mobile and everything all come together.
Yes.
Partly because of the attitudes and the awareness, partly because of the excitement of people wanting to get rich. But what do you think?
I mean, in terms of Microsoft to start with, they're going to be around for a long time yet, and I think they're transitioning their business away from the old sort of Office, getting a bulk of their revenues from Office, and I think they are, they're moving with the new Office 365 and the integration of Office 365 with all the different apps and the CRM systems and Yammer and Skype and Link. And I think they're going to change things dramatically, and I think with they're going to be around for a long time yet, and I think that they're going to make a big inroads into the tablet market in time. I really do believe that. In terms of the crowdfunding, crowdsourcing sites, I think it's a really interesting space. It's for a lot of businesses, especially businesses which are targeting the consumer. I think that it's a fantastic opportunity for them to raise money in a reasonably effective and cost-effective manner. So where someone can go onto the site and see something which they may buy themselves, whether it's a smartwatch or it's some new gaming device. I think those are it's a really interesting service. I think it's got to come with caveats. Being an accountant, you've got to look at the regulatory side of it. And if a lot of people have put in all their life savings into one or two companies, and those companies go bust, 90% of startups go bust. So it's you've got to be, what you don't want is some kind of mis-selling scandal and suddenly it unravels the whole sector. So there's a lot of things where you do have to be very careful because it's people's money and not everybody's wise enough to sort of spread it across lots of companies and only do amounts that they can lose. So there's always a risk with sort of the crowdfunding side, but I think they provide a fantastic service, and I think it's only going to grow. I hope that it doesn't get over-regulated, but I think there's probably a need to be slightly more regulated just to make sure people are aware of the risks of putting their money into these sort of ventures.
Well, that's one space I would really agree that we need some level of regulation. I personally don't really, I won't say I don't understand the crowdsourcing, but I understand the mentality that allows people to invest. Because if I'm going to invest in something, I want a piece of the action. I don't want to invest in you just so I can get one of your products, because I could have bought one of your products.
Yes.
And I don't know for a fact I'm going to get it yet because I'm investing, and that there's no, it's a lottery ticket that I can win my money back.
Yes.
Woohoo.
Yeah.
Right? I want to, if I'm going to invest, I want to participate. So I don't see any of these crowdfunding sites that are letting me invest for a piece of the action is one question. And the second one is, us people without bags of money to invest assume that there's a big boys version of crowdfunding as well. Is there some website somewhere that all of these guys who have, instead of putting in 10 quid like the punters do, are they putting in 10,000 quid? Are there these types of scenarios out there?
I mean, there's kind of closed investment clubs where you have investors who are putting in £50,000, £100,000 checks. There are quite a few of those, but they're off radar and it's kind of by invitation only sort of thing. The crowdfunding sites, you can buy equity stakes in the businesses, for a lot of them are trying to raise sort of 25,000 for 20% of the equity, and you can put your £100 in and get a very small percentage of that company. But the one thing that's always key as an investor, and if you talk to any investor, pretty much they all say the same thing. When you say what is the most important thing, they say management. The one problem that the crowdfunding sites have and will always have is that the investors don't get to meet management. And you could put on a video on there and get to see how good they are on a video, but you don't know how many takes that was, how much makeup they've got on, you don't know, these sort of things you don't know. And as an investor, the most important thing that we're looking at is management team. So it's got to have it's got to be a good business concept. You've got to have the right risk profile, good momentum, and an exit route. But the most important thing is always, is this the management team going to deliver? And early stage companies are even more important, because you can't, after 6 months of things aren't going right, just sack the chief exec and get someone else in, like you can with a larger company. If you sack the management, you sack the chief exec, that's usually also your technical architect, the person driving the business, person with all the personal contacts. It's typically the only employee as well. So I think that's a challenge that the crowdfunding sites are always going to have is you don't get that benefit of sitting down with management, having a chat with them, understanding what their motivations are, finding out are they really committed to this, or have they got other things on the side, or so I think that's always going to be a challenge.
So how about the flip side then? If I'm the startup who's getting funding from a crowdsourced site, and then I go and I start to put my business plan in front of investors, is there any baggage that gets in the way, or is this something that's acceptable and can be negotiated as part of the deals?
In terms of they've already gone to a crowdfunding site, I mean, we wouldn't from our point of view, we wouldn't sort of put a black mark against them for doing that. The only caveat to that would be if they've kind of they've put all their IPR and their whole sort of business concept up onto the web and everybody can see it, and you feel that reduces their competitive advantage, then that's obviously going to have an impact. But for most businesses, if they've got a patent, then that's public anyway. If they haven't got a patent, well, people, typically most company websites tell people everything they do anyway. So, it shouldn't be that much of a hindrance, really.
Brilliant. Thanks for joining us in the Beyond Cloud Discovery discussions. Next week we'll be meeting with Phil Bindley, CTO of a very unusual data center situated in a nuclear bunker. That's what we call security. Look forward to it.